Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Welcome to
4Kids Flashback. Hello and welcome to 4Kids Flashback. My name is Tara Sands. I am joined by
Steve Yurko.
And here we are again. If you are new to the show, this is a podcast about 4Kids Entertainment, a company that was around back in the 2000s that brought shows like Pokémon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Piece, stuff like that. They dubbed it and put it in your ear holes. And we go deep behind the scenes and get questions answered about the why and the how and the where and the when. So yeah. But I say that because, Steve and I, we've been working on this podcast for over a year now. And I think I have this like really comprehensive list of anybody I should know that worked there. And this weekend I did a convention with an actor who I didn't know and who was there because of the projects he did at 4Kids.
Should I ask for a name?
No, yeah. So, I mean, and I'm curious because it is someone who worked on One Piece. So his name is Jesse Hooker. Super, super sweet guy.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he's actually, I've seen him starting to pop up at some conventions and stuff. Because for a while he was uncredited or miscredited. I don't think anyone knew who he was, who voiced the characters he played. So.
So now it's official.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because, again, it's another like typical 4Kids story. He can't even remember who brought him in the first place. The name of the character he played was Ace, but it was called
Trace,
right something else.
Dub,
Trace in the So he's like, I don't know what name to say. So we had such a funny 4Kids story.
I feel like this is a question for him, but I'm sure he's answered a million times by now. Does he know why they changed the name, or did he just show up and just?
No, he just showed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, and look, I was like, I'd love you to do an interview. He's like, I don't remember anything. He also was in Yu-Gi-Oh! He thinks he replaced Andrew Rannells when he couldn't do some role at some point in what Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe GX or something.
Hmm.
But again, like he's like, I don't know and I don't remember enough to talk about it.
Speaking of Andrew Rannells and Yu-Gi-Oh! And 4Kids and you, I put on the Pluto TV Yu-Gi-Oh! Channel over the weekend.
Oh, how was that?
It was fun because a helicopter shows up and opens the door, and it's little Mokuba saying, "Hey, it's me, Seto." And I was like, "Can I rewind this?" Because I feel like that's just like a funny clip to have. It's like this is like Tara showing up, every night we record, just in a little helicopter.
Hey, it's me, Steve. Yeah.
So,
hey, Steve, I'm here. Help!
So I had a little reminder of my weekday life or my weekday.
Oh my gosh, I'm haunting you.
Priorities.
Would it make you? What if I staged a fake kidnapping during our session like, so you could really feel like Mokuba?
Just take her.
Honestly, maybe it would be somewhere better. Maybe they're well-intentioned kidnappers. I don't know.
It's a chance at a second life. Huh?
It's with Pegasus. So how cool to meet another, like, because again, a lot of times I do these conventions, I have no idea what show anyone's from. Mm-hmm. And then he kept saying he had lived in New York. And I was like, could he be a 4Kids person? And I was really just like disappointed in my detective skills at that point.
Oh, so you didn't even know this until like right up. Yeah.
Oh, until we were in talking on the ride from the airport.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Such a super nice guy. I'm sorry that there probably won't be an interview because, maybe we'll at some point, I think it would be fun for the people who like that, maybe do a watch party or something, But he had the same story as so many people. He's like, I did this thing, I forgot about it. And then I wanted to I wanted to hear my voice in something, and there was a whole different version of it online. Just everybody has this same kind of story. Like, so many people from One Piece had no idea that it was being redubbed somewhere else, and until years later.
Until like now it's like all the rage. And you're like, oh yeah, wasn't I in that show? And then you look up and you're like, oh, 1,000 episodes.
So great. Yeah. But yeah, no, he was telling a funny story. Like when he says who he played on the show, like, who do you say, Trace or Ace? Because I mean, it's a weird conundrum.
Right.
There were a couple name changes on that show. Like, oh yeah, a lot. Okay, a lot.
Yeah, there was a bunch here and there. I mean, I think they didn't want to acknowledge Christmas for one character because one character's literal name is Miss Merry Christmas, so they changed her to Miss Groundhog's Day.
That's what Miss Ground. Oh, that's funny because I've seen that name, but I didn't know.
Even though she turns into a mole, but clever, I would say. I think it. Oh,
I see. Okay, when Funimation did they change how loyal are they in general to the names?
For the most part, like very very loyal to the Japanese. But the thing is, the problem is with a lot of that show, there's a lot of names that are adapted. You know, it's kind of like.
That's what I was going to ask.
Like some names, like they're said in Japanese. Sorry if I'm putting this in layman's terms, but they're like kind of they're meant to be like interpreted in the language. Like there's a character named Blackbeard, but it's like they say in Japanese in the Japanese version. So obviously, like you'd think, well, you don't want to call him the Japanese. Translation of Blackbeard. It feels like it's intended
right. You want to say Blackbeard.
It's intended to be whatever the language is. So
that you're familiar with.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So
that makes sense.
There's a lot of that in One Piece. So it's up to the adapters, the translators. It's usually their call.
Okay, cool. Well, so I wanted to just give Jesse a plug since he probably won't be on the show, but he's a great dude. If you guys are on Instagram, let me just tell you where you can follow him and request him at a convention near you. It's just on Instagram, it's Hooker and Co. HOOKERANDCO. Yeah. So shout out to Jesse. Really cool to meet another person. And again, disappointed in myself for not already knowing who he was. But the truth is I think he came in after I moved, so it wasn't as if he was someone I ignored in the hallway.
Would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a fun little fun way that 4Kids figured into my weekend. Also at a convention, like someone showed up in our 4Kids Flashback hat, which is always fun to see. I love that hat. With Steve's logo, you can go to 4kidsflashback.com, click the shop or merch buttons, and get yourself one of those. But yeah, it was so exciting. Like the person wearing that was like behind someone online, and I was so distracted by the hat.
But you're like looking over the shoulder.
Yeah, he has our hat on. I know, I'm such a dork. So that was my. Sorry,
I said who isn't. So
who isn't? But mesmerized by your artwork. But speaking of, you can go to our website, 4kidsflashback.com. Find, all the links are in the show notes. If you want, tell them about the ad-free early episodes, Steve.
Week early ad-free.
In your sultry voice.
I just gave you a look for a moment there. Yes, if you go
gave me a look that none of you saw. Yeah. So how do they do that?
Well, you go to patreon.com/4kidsflashback with the number 4 in the URL. If you love the show so much and you just want to hear the next episode, like lickety split, just, donate, to our Patreon there, and, we'll post some other, like, exclusive stuff on there as well. And also that grants you access to our Discord server, exclusive for Patreon members.
And if you want to stroll down memory lane with, like, let's say some of the promos from back in the day or all the theme songs that we could legally put on there, check out our YouTube page. It's youtube.com/@ 4Kids Flashback, and you can see our playlists of all the 4Kids-ish stuff, and hopefully more stuff soon I'm going to be adding as we go. But our guest today is someone that I don't know well, and I'm really, really excited to hear his backstory. So we will be talking today to J David Brimmer. I don't know if I'm supposed to call him Jay or David or Brimsky, but we'll find that out. And we'll be right back. Our guest today is the delightful J David Brimmer. At 4Kids, he played too many roles for me to possibly name. So here are some highlights from his days there. King Gorge in Fighting Foodons, Ishtar in Yu-Gi-Oh!, in One Piece, Sir Crocodile, Mr. Zero, Lucky Roo, Captain Morgan, Sunshine in Ultimate Muscle, Zanramon in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the list goes on. Thank you for being here, David.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to see you again.
Did any of those sound familiar to you? Any of those roles I named?
Oh my goodness, yeah. That's healing back.
Good.
King Gorge. I haven't thought about that.
There was a miscredit. Sorry.
Oh, is there a miscredit already in there, Steve? What is it?
I think so.
We love getting things corrected.
No,
So what
this
was
is
the
totally.
miscredit?
God, this is the an awful place in your intro. It's like, thanks for being here, David. Now let me correct my co-hosts.
No, correct me, because this is what IMDb said. And David, one of our missions with this podcast is to get this stuff corrected. Because sometimes you're credited with a role that you didn't do, or someone else, it happens constantly. So, Steve, which role do you think it is, so we can get to the bottom of it?
Odeon Ishtar is what Tara was referring to earlier, in case anyone's going to get up on you on just like, it's like, oh, say his first name or something like that.
Okay.
Lucky Roo, I don't think that was you. I know you're Crocodile and Mr. Zero are the same person too.
They're the same person?
Yeah.
See, I don't know anything.
No, I don't believe I was Lucky Roo.
No,
Okay.
This is
Captain Axan Morgan was the first one I did.
Yes, you were Axan Morgan, you were Crocodile.
And of course, Crocodile, we had a blast with him.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about that eventually. But
okay, so hopefully by the time you guys hear this, I will have corrected that mistake on IMDb, and I'll take the Lucky Roo off of there. Look, I'm even making notes. I mean, we're basically detectives on this show.
Mm-hmm.
Look at us solving mysteries.
Sorry to derail that, but let's get back on track.
No, that was great. But David, your name has come up on the podcast before because you worked at NYU, I believe. And we'll get into this with some of the people that became 4Kids actors as well. Like, you taught stage combat, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's right.
So is that something I'm assuming you're one of these people who knew they wanted to be an actor. You've probably always had this beautiful voice. How does all this happen to lead you to NYU and teaching and meeting some of our friends?
Oh, well, yeah. Basically, I was training with a woman named Stella Adler back in the late 70s, early 80s. And was, training to be an actor in New York, especially was interested in classical acting. And a friend of mine and I were working on a fight scene from Romeo and Juliet. And this is how long ago it was. I was playing Tybalt. He was playing Mercutio. And now it would probably be Friar Lawrence or, old Capulet. But, back in the day. So anyway, he's at the time, I was fencing. I was working out with the NYU fencing team and had been a fencer back when I was at Exeter. Anyway, he said, well, you fence, so you should choreograph the fight. And I was choreographing the fight, and I was lunging at him. He was supposed to retreat and parry, and instead he lunged at the same time.
Oh, no.
And the point of my sword caught him right next to his eye, right on the occipital lobe, and pulled the skin to the outside and then released. And there was a little scratch there. It wasn't even bleeding. But I'm like, okay, that's it. We're cutting that move. He's like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll get it down. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm sure you'll get it down. I'm just never doing it again.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that there was a hell of a lot more to doing this than just knowing how to fence. And I tell my students that's when I became a stage combat slut. I couldn't call myself a whore because I wasn't charging for it, but I went around and worked with whoever I could in the city.
Yeah.
And then realized as I was working with folks that I was seeing things other people wouldn't see. I'd say, oh, we better watch for that. And he's like, what are you talking about? Well, look at the blade right there next to the person's eyes. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. Like you were seeing a few steps ahead of what could go wrong.
And you were spotting
it was
things
preventative.
And realizing I have kind of a knack for this. And so I started choreographing some stuff and people started asking me, well, could you choreograph this? And then they started offering me money for it. And I went, ka-ching.
Okay.
This is a lot better than waiting tables. And that's how I started, choreographing. And that led to teaching at NYU. New York City being a nexus, there's a certain place down, Broadway and like Waverly Street there, which is right by NYU. And I happened I just graduated from NYU and was talking to one of my professors that, I toured a show with him around Europe with, and saying, we don't have any stage comp at NYU. That's crazy. It's a major university.
Wow.
He's like, you're right. We should talk to the new chair, Ron Argelander. Do you know Ron? I'm like, yeah, he was my advisor. Yeah, you should go and talk to him. And here's Ron right here. And there he was walking down the street. He's like, Ron, you remember Dave? It's like, oh, yeah. And said, well, come into my office the next day, went in and got hired. And I've been teaching there for like 40 years now.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. So I assume you've always had a very distinct voice. Was voiceover as an actor, was voiceover on your radar as a job you could do? Or was it just sort of you were more focused on theater? It was always in the back of my mind. Okay. And of course, friends would always say, come on, man, what are you doing? You're sitting on a gold mine. Why aren't you, and it's like, I'll get to that. And so one of my students who was my assistant at the time, Wayne Grayson, believe it or not, mentioned that he'd gone in for an audition at this place called 4Kids and had suddenly been hired for a lot of stuff. And he said, David, you've got to get your ass in there. And I went like, oh, yeah, okay, sure. And I finally, this is how long ago it was. I finally cut a demo tape, a little cassette tape. A cassette tape.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the younger folks, yes. Once upon a time.
Yeah.
And then chopped that around. I went to 4Kids and dropped it off. And nothing really came of it until for one of the Pokémon episodes, they realized they'd forgotten a character. The day they were recording, and they went, "Oh my God,
this is very 4Kids."
We got this character, Dr. Proctor, and so I got a call. Can you be in here at 1:00? And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so I went in, and that started it. And then once you're in, I was passed around all the different directors for different shows.
That's when you became a whore.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. Thank you. Good segue there. Yes. Yeah, there we go. Well, it's just a little callback.
So when Wayne talked to you about this stuff, did you know anything about anime? I mean, obviously it was not what it is today. So were you just like, oh, cartoons sound fun, or oh, I love anime? Like, where did you stand in all this?
I really didn't have much of opinion on it. I'd seen this, if any, it was fairly low grade. So it's like, well, this isn't Disney, animation, that sort of thing.
Because that's what we knew. Yeah. We were just kind of ignorant about it all.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, I'm definitely, okay boomer. Even back then, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever this is. All right. I can be a villain. Yeah, I can be a villain. That's total fun. So I was intrigued, but he was saying, no, really, this is a lot of fun. And as you know, and I'm sure you've heard from a lot of folks, that was kind of a golden period in there at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And I was in later. I came in later. I wasn't there at the ground floor, with all the main characters being cast. But it was fun. And there was some where we actually did get to record together.
Because you worked on Turtles. So,
we would, rehearsing together and actually being in the booth together and being able to play off of each other was just a hoot.
Hi guys, Tara jumping in here to let you know where you can meet Steve and I. Steve will have a table in Artist Alley at MagFest if you're in the Maryland, D.C. area, January 23rd through 26th. And I will be a couple places. If you're going to be in Dallas, I will be there at the Amazing Art Expo from January 17th to the 19th. I'll be at Savannah Animazing Convention from January 25th to 26th. If you're up in Washington State, I will be at Anime Washington from February 7th through 9th. And March 1st and 2nd, I will be at Reading Anime Con up in Reading, California. So come say hi, hang out. It's so much fun when we get to meet listeners. So let us know what you think of the podcast. We are always open to feedback and suggestions from you guys. See you soon.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
I mean, and you're a theater guy, so we talk about this a lot. Like, so much of what we did there, so many of us were theater people. So much of what we did there goes against all of our theater training. like we didn't rehearse. We got the things at the last minute. We never got backstory. There was no character analysis. I spoke to someone recently who said, "Oh yeah, I wanted to do character analysis on my character," and they laughed at me.
Look at the picture. What?
Yeah, they're like, just do it. Yeah,
come on, look at it.
Sound like that. Exactly. Or even just having to match lip flap and it not being a natural flow of conversation. As a Stella Adler trained actor, did this drive you crazy?
Well,
or was it just fun?
It was because one thing is, I'm not taking it seriously. This is a lark.
Right.
This is fun.
It's fun.
My main job, I'm a fight master with the Society of American Fight Directors. There are 23 of us, I think, in the country. So, primarily I performed at the Metropolitan Opera for 14 years, so this was like a lark. This is a hoot. And when you mentioned Stella, it is, yes, you have to make instant choices. That's all it is. It's not committing to it. In some ways, you're over-committing to it.
That's it.
But, we're still getting the truth of what the experience is here. That's what it's all about. I mean, one of my favorite things that Stella ever said to me, because in stage combat, you run into the, fake method folks who are like, yeah, it's got to be really real. So I'm just going to slap you real hard because then it'll be really real. And I like to say to that.
That's more lazy, actually.
Exactly. And it's always when you're hitting someone else, that's when you got to get really method, right? I've said to one guy, it's like, you know what? We have to shoot you in the second act. So I'll get a 22 and I'll try to miss the vital organs. Then it'll be really real, right? Is that what we're going for?
Oh my God.
But what Stella said to me one time, she said, David, if people wanted to see reality, they'd ride the subway. They go to the theater to see the truth. And so that's the essence.
That's why she was Stella Adler.
It doesn't matter that this is a crazy little plot that we're doing and the characters we have. We go for the truth of what's in this story. And when it's this broad, as I said, I performed at the Metropolitan Opera for 14 years. It can become operatic, because you're playing larger than life characters.
That's such a great way to put it, because, again, things felt heightened there, which is sometimes a criticism of 4Kids and sometimes why people like 4Kids. But there was a heightened sense of how we were performing these roles in a lot of these shows. And operatic is a really nice way to put that.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of some of them, you're almost singing your roles when you're doing it. Having worked at the Met, I think of now, again, hi, boomer. Okay. But back in the day, there was a show on TV called Hogan's Heroes.
Uh-huh.
And in that show, the main, all the Germans were played by German Jews, had come over or had fought the Nazis. A lot of the folks in that show had
actual
fought
veterans.
The Nazis. And Werner Klemperer, who was the colonel in that show, the German colonel, literally, if you listen to him, it's like he's singing the role the whole time. Colonel Hogan, it's just the way he uses his voice the whole time.
Interesting.
He is definitely all the German characters are cartoon characters in that show. And that was on purpose. They were meant to be made fun of and all of that. They were meant to be ridiculous.
That's and also like when you're learning an accent, you're learning the musicality of the accent.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I've tried, like, sometimes there's been times where literally I've tried to learn an accent, and there'll be musical notes. Like if I go to like a book that's trying to help me learn it, musical notes to help you get the lilt of Irish that actually says like go up a half step or whatever it is. So this is just another example of that. And also the lip flap to me is the drum beat of the scene because you're locked into that.
Well, we mentioned the lip flap. My goodness, I can't remember, how many scripts we rewrote on the spot because, the translator, it's like, no, that's not going to fit this. So we've got to really find what's going to be the sense of the story here. And it's going to match what that cartoon is doing. And of course, as you know, they usually end with an open. At the end, there's always usually kind of a at the end. You know what I'm saying,
And then you're like, but that's not at all what's written here. That's a letter M. I can't make my mouth open while I say the letter M.
A hard consonant at the end when the mouth is open.
It was such a different set of problems than what you would deal with in another kind of any production. But what we get back to a lot, and this is so true for you, is that I'd say like 80 to 90% of us had theater training that we just relied on. So it wasn't like, oh, we didn't take this seriously. We had all this other external stuff to worry about, like lip flap, voice tone, blah, blah, blah. So we just relied on whatever training we had to convey whatever we were saying. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But it was a lot of just trial and error.
Well,
there.
Also, you have such a very strong fan base for this. And so people have strong feelings about it. I know some people hate our dubbing. They just the Japanese. And it's like,
they're
fair enough. That's great, man. Whatever you love, I'm totally fine with that. The thing that I found amusing sometimes was when you're watching the Japanese and you see that the Japanese actors aren't really bothering with the lip flap as they're doing it. And it's like,
that's what I'm like, we're matching it
actually paying more attention to this than they were. So it's like, okay. And, I'm fine with that. It really isn't, I'm not a major fan, really. It's like, I think it's great. It's fine, but it's not like I have feelings one way or the other. It's like, no, whatever floats your boat, enjoy.
Yeah, you're just there to do a job and hopefully make it good.
I was surprised when suddenly, I was famous, quasi-famous, when I went to my first a convention, was like, oh my God, what?
People care? I know, I'm still blown away by it.
Yeah.
It's still shocking to me. So we think your first role was this Pokémon role, and then my guess is that maybe like an Ultraman Tiga or an Ultimate Muscle was probably the next thing you did there. Do you have any memory like of the order of things? It's okay if you don't.
I think it might have been Sunshine next.
In Ultimate Muscle.
And that's working with Eric.
Yeah, Eric Stewart was the director on that.
And, I really enjoyed working with Eric because Eric would be so specific with what he wanted. And as an Adlerian, I just loved that. It's like, great, let's go for it. Let's go down the rabbit hole. So he knew what he wanted. And I that was a pleasure. That was just a pleasure to work with him. Same thing.
Well, that's a physical show. So, sorry, I cut you off. Go on.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, it was very physical. And so that was fun being able to, coming from the world of stage combat, professional wrestling. It's like, let's get into this.
I mean, especially those exertion noises, you must have been way better than most of us at that stuff because of your stage combat and your physicality with all these roles.
Well, I suppose so. I think folks are generally fairly good with the exertion, but and then of course we're exaggerating this a lot, when you're taking punches and whatnot. Although I must admit, another one I did was, I don't know if it was here, but I did Slayer.
Slayers. That was a different studio,
Yeah.
but it was most of the same cast and at the same time. But was that a
'cause
very
I just remember
physical
having
show
what
also?
my character, I had a death, and I remember really going, no, I want to record that again because I'm looking at how I'm dying. So I want to make the right gurgling noises as
Right.
as
That's
the
your
swords
area of
come
expertise.
through my body, being stabbed from behind. Just like, it's like, oh yeah, I want to get that just right. This is my death scene.
That's
so
funny. Yeah. So, I mean, you're somebody who I'm looking at your IMDb again, and it's, you weren't just working at 4Kids, you were working for Central Park Media, Media Blasters, NYAV. So once you started at 4Kids, did those doors just kind of start opening?
as we say, we've been talking about it. Yes, you're a whore. So, and it's an incestuous little world. Folks, and they pass your name around, and it's, as we know, it was such a wonderful, personable group. You had to be able to survive the hours we put in and, the craziness of it. So it's the same. It reminded me of like working on the soaps back in like the 80s.
Oh,
same
okay.
thing, because it was so grueling that if you were going to survive as an actor on the soaps, you had to be a decent individual. Had to be pleasant
Right.
and get along with folks, because otherwise the people just aren't going to deal with it. Divas don't only go so far, because you get tired of working with them at a certain point.
Oh,
And we all
totally.
just enjoyed hanging out together. And maybe we partied a little too hard upon occasion. We don't
possible.
have to delve
It's
too
definitely
deeply
possible.
back into that. Luckily, there wasn't
No.
too much internet back then when we were doing the things we did.
No cell phone cameras,
Right.
thank goodness.
But we just had a fantastic time. And it was a great group of folks.
Well, it felt to me like the closest to a theater repertory company I'd ever be in. Like, they'd pull you into a room and be like, do this voice. And then you'd go to another studio down the hall and be like, hey, can you be an 80-year-old penguin? And you'd be like, of course I can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the old radio days. That's exactly what it felt like,
Yeah. Oh, I miss it so much. And the studio in Texas, Funimation, Crunchyroll, I haven't worked there, but it's a similar kind of place where there's all these studios, and I'm so envious that they all get to see each other. And
Yeah. I mean, what's kind of killed it now a bit, I didn't know it's the way the market goes, but now you must have your home studio. And, to me, it's like, well, no, that's cutting out an important part of this industry, which is the engineer.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah, I mean,
director
they're on
too,
the line, but it's-
because
yeah.
you're now expected to be your own engineer and, just send us the finished product, man. But being able to go in there and had an engineer you've worked with, can set those levels.
Yep.
And that's the experience I miss completely.
Yeah. Well, and for anime specifically, and we've talked about this a little bit on here, engineers became almost like assistant directors. Because they were watching sometimes they had their eye on the flap or the performance while the director was more on one or the other. And some of them are directing today.
Yes.
Because that's the eye they had to have and the ear they had to
And
have.
sometimes you'd be going through, it might be a different director, but the through line was the engineer.
Yes,
Who could then
that's
go back
exactly
and
it.
pull up, well, here's what they sounded like in this episode,
Thank God for
right?
that.
You're going,
Oh my
wait,
God.
who was this guy now? What did he sound like? I don't recall. Here you go. Here are a few references,
Tara's.
Speaking of,
I was going to say
sorry, go on,
Tara's
Steve.
letting out a deep sigh there. I feel like that last tidbit there kind of hits home for you.
Engineer, now today it's called voice ref, and at the beginning of every session they play it for us, but I don't feel like it was that automatic back then when David and I were working. It wasn't just at the beginning of the session pull up the voice. It was, oh, I think you're off voice. You need to hear yourself.
Oh, yes.
It was that
I would
kind of
ask.
thing.
It's like, oh, no, guys, it's been about 4 months. So refresh me, because I've been
Right.
doing so many voices in between.
Yeah, or even if you had it, you might have just been down the hall doing a high-pitched
Yeah.
voice or something different, and you're where your voice was, or it was early in the morning, and the session you had done a few months before had been at 6:00. So there's all these weird factors that people don't think about when they're like, why don't they sound the same?
The same actor,
but-
isn't it, right?
Yeah.
What the hell's wrong
but
with
it's
it?
everyone's job. Yeah, right, exactly. So I want to get into some more specifics. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Happens at some point. Steve, I said it wrong. So it's Odeon Ishtar, right?
Yeah.
Odeon Ishtar.
Okay.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any memories of that role that you want to share?
I just thoroughly enjoyed him because he just looked so badass. So he's bald and he's got a ponytail in back, and then he's got Egyptian hieroglyph tattoos on half his face. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. I love playing this guy. I can really
that's
just,
juicy.
juicy is the word. Like, oh, let's have fun. And it was, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I remember, with Yu-Gi-Oh! Going like, what, it seems like I say the same thing almost every week. Destroy them all. I will destroy them all. You'll pay. And of course, they never do. So it was that kind of thing. But and then it was fun when I was actually defeated at the end because of, I believe in the Japanese version, I die. But in the American version,
but we couldn't do that.
No, we can't have anyone die. So they had a shot of me in a hospital bed. And I actually came back in for a full session just so, as you just see me lying in the bed, but just to go. Just so you knew I was still alive.
Just because God forbid.
So I got a whole session of just ragged breathing. So they could cut to Odeon Ishtar. He's not dead. He's still in the hospital.
Oh my gosh. I love that you remember that because so you were so aware of these changes being made to the show where I was kind of in the dark about that. So I love that you actually knew that things like that were happening.
I'm going to jump back now because remember you were talking about Dr. Proctor, my first job in Pokémon when I came in. And that one, it's they were bringing Pikachu to the hospital. And I was this wise ass doctor. And, our dear little, girl is saying, oh, please, won't you help Pikachu? I'm like, well, why don't you take him over to the Pokemon Center and Nurse Joy? Something like that. And then she said, oh, please, doctor, won't you help us? Please, 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 please. And my line, the original line was, well, I could never refuse a request from a young girl. And I'm like, you really want me to say that? And they're like, well, that's a literal translation from the Japanese. I'm like, yes, I realize that that's the literal translation from the Japanese, but we're not in Japan. And they go, no, just record that. And of course, 2 weeks later, I was called back in to re-record the line, which was, well, they never told me about this in medical school. But I'm like, you really want me to be talking to what looks like maybe an 8-year-old girl? And it's like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, because that went up the ladder, got
denied,
and went right back down.
With me. I got a whole other session out of it because I had to re-record the line. So,
and you also had to record, and you also were able to record some of Dr. Proctor's breathing, I guess.
A nice young girl. Ooh.
Well, now when you put them back to back,
That is so creepy. Yeah, there's a lot that could be taken out of context.
Certainly.
Context on that show. Yeah. So I don't know if you remember this. One of the fans asked if you remember that we re-recorded a ton of Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes for an uncut version of the show that was on DVD only. Do you have any... I don't remember recording it. It exists, so I did it.
Yeah, I
vaguely
remember doing it. I remember it was another session. We went in and then all the reacts that you have to do and all that stuff. Give me 3 of these and 5 of these, and I do remember, but again, it's all a blur.
Yeah, because in that version, the hospital bed scene would have been different. So you must have, if that was one of the seasons, and I'm not positive,
I think
the listeners.
If I could interject, I think it was probably you were, I think you would have been on the uncut Shaman King episodes, I think, before the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ones. You might have been on Yu-Gi-Oh! But Shaman King, you voiced 2 characters in that.
Yes.
Who show up immediately, so... Yeah, one of the a lot of fans are always interested about the uncut dubs, but most of the answers we get, we're just like, oh, that was another day in the studio, I guess. It does more together.
Yeah, that's where we are with it. They just shove the script in front of us and we read. They smack us a few times with a stick and start speaking.
I think you were one of the, at least from what I could recall from that dub, I think you were one of the few characters that actually swore in that short-lived uncut dub. So there's a little bit of trivia.
There are a lot of these. There are outtakes that I hope never see the light of day.
No, but in the uncut dub, you were allowed to actually swear.
Yeah,
so that was different. That actually got.
But there was as David's saying, there was way more swearing.
Yes,
sorry.
And there are some where we just did outtakes just for our own fun. That were completely off color. And
I'm sure that must have
been. And it's like, no, they never need to see the sunlight of day.
There must have been plenty of those on Ultimate Muscle, I'm guessing.
Probably. Okay, I'm going to butcher the names of the characters you played in Shaman King. Basan and Mosuke? Is that?
Mosuke, yeah.
Okay. Now, did you ever get to talk to yourself? Were those characters that got to interact with each other? Because I'm so curious what you did to differentiate the voices for that.
I'm trying to remember if I did do that. I remember Mosuke was definitely, I'm best friend too. So I remember that being, really going, full Toshiro Moshifune kind of, we're here with this and we're playing this.
Okay.
In that way. I'm sorry. I can't remember.
That's okay.
It's one of those. It's like,
yeah. And I'm curious too, because you have such a specific sound. Did they lock you into doing that voice, or did they let you try different things when you were in the studio?
Well, they would certainly allow me to try different things. And sometimes I would, auditioning for other parts, he'd play things, but no, when people would say, we want you for this is what they wanted. This is what they're looking for. Now don't want anything like that. We want that. So generally there was a variation on this. And there were some times when you play with other different types of characters, but they like the gravelly, gravitas.
It's good. Yeah, and it works for villains so well. I mean, it's so great. Ugh.
Yeah, and then the thing is, there's so much fun to just, as I said, though, with some of the villains, when they'd say, hey, man, I yelled at my minions last week. When I said, if you failed me for the last time, I said that last week. You just failed me again. When are there any consequences?
No consequences.
I just keep threatening
cartoons.
them. You.
Steve, do you have? I'm assuming you have some One Piece questions, so I'm going to let you get the ball rolling on that.
Sure, I guess we get that. We talked about it earlier in the show. You were Morgan and Crocodile on the show. Morgan obviously came first. I'm curious, very early villain. Wasn't in the story too long, but I'm curious if you had any memories of that character.
Well, one of the things that was great with that, when I was in to record the first times, they had the creators over from Japan.
Oh, okay.
So I got to meet the guy who did the story. And it was interesting because you get the cultural difference and, with the translator. And they asked me about, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a fight director. And they're like, oh, that's very interesting. And I started talking about it a little bit and the guy listened for a bit and then turned away. And I was in the middle of, and then, this, and the translator went, no, he's finished now.
Oh my.
Basically, you may stop speaking. He was just being polite, basically. And the difference between cultures. He asked me a question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to answer the question for you because that's what we do. But I didn't realize, no, we're just doing, this is just the exchange. It's part of the exchange. I ask, you answer, and that's that. I didn't want a full
Interesting. It's so interesting. You're one of the few people that did get to work with the Japanese team. Steve, we've had trouble establishing exactly who was in the room because it wouldn't have been the actual creator of One Piece. We don't think
producers of the anime.
One of the producers,
for sure.
Yeah.
Who, and I don't know if we've ever gotten names from it, but definitely, it just lines up with a lot of your fellow cast members had some of them in on sessions. Of course, some of the main characters, I think there was an extensive audition process. Was that the case for you, or was it more like you auditioned, you cast, and then show up, and like the Japanese staff just happens?
Pretty much that was it. I wasn't put through the ringer with this one. There were other times when you'd have to try several different recordings and whatnot. But this one, for Captain Axe Hand, was this was the sound they thought fit him, and I thought so too. I was just at the time, I'm like, oh, he's dead already. That's it. Jeez, this guy was going to be a great villain. But then I got Crocodile, so I'm not.
And then you get Crocodile. I do remember auditioning for him as well. I'm curious what you were going for that differed from your Axan Morgan voice.
Oh no, Crocodile's very different. Crocodile there's much more going on under the surface with the Crocodile. He's one of the things that we were talking, one of the things we would talk about working with Eric too is where are we going? And we had a very strong Jack Nicholson with Crocodile, thinking that kind of that kind of dangerous attitude he has, and there's always a little bit of a smile when he's saying things, and so ways like that you work your way into the character, and it helps you then get back into the character when you're getting back into recording. So that was a lot of fun playing with him and discovering him, and really.
Yeah, he's a real bastard.
Yes.
There was a lot to work with there. Damned if I don't ask about this one line. I'm curious.
Whoa. Okay.
Does the concept of a desert toilet ring any bells for you?
Oh my. Vaguely, yes.
What?
Maybe you're not aware of this. I don't know. I just assumed so, but I think one of the most. It still gets passed around every now and then on the internet, but I think probably the most memorable line from your stint as Crocodile is because the main character Luffy, he's falling into kind of like quicksand, like a sinkhole,
right?
And Luffy says like, "Oh, it's like a desert toilet," and you respond, and that makes you desert doo doo.
Oh yes.
No one has brought this up to you in recent years.
That makes you desert doo doo. Yeah.
Wow.
I think just like amongst One Piece fans, I think a lot of people are aware of it. But
that's
I was
wonderful.
Curious of it.
That warms the cockles of my heart.
Well, pleases me to bring it up.
For
that is a very 4Kids line.
Isn't it though?
From
yeah.
Oh, very, very.
Yeah.
But from
it's like, how do we make this for Saturday morning? Dude.
Right.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say too, like having recently revisited that version of the show, you just sounded like you were having a blast.
We were.
It sounded like you were having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and and again, working with the best, working with Eric Stewart, so it was just a blast. And again, the whole, as we said, our happy little crew, our dysfunctional little crew. It reminded me back in like the 80s and 90s. A lot of us worked on the party circuit in New York, which were corporate parties. And they would hire people. There was a 4-hour time frame. And we're talking about back in the 80s now. Okay. You were paid $125 an hour.
Oh, that was a lot.
So you could make $500 for a 4-hour party. And the way it was done was there would be a theme. Like it's a big one then was because Happy Days was big, was like the 50s. So you'd have 3 different characters you'd do, So some people would do like greasers. You'd get your leather jacket and stuff. Now I'd do stuff like that, but I'd always put a twist on it. So if I was wearing a leather jacket, I was Wolfman Jack. with full Wolfman prosthetic.
I know that is.
Yeah. Now you know why I work on the radio. Yeah, all right. And you get paid to put the lampshade on your head for all the corporate folks. And that's what you do. And it was the same thing. It was the same crew of like 40 people that you'd see at every party. And for like 20 years, man, it was golden. Very similar.
Yeah,
and then
that sounds
I found
great.
that similar kind of community in the voice community again. And that was just wonderful to find again.
I have a voice question, and it's such a weird one that I've never asked because you naturally have that gravel. Now, when I try to put that gravel in, it kills me. Mm-hmm. Are there voices for you that hurt more, or is it when you intensify it? Like, because it's your natural instrument.
It is.
So speaking, obviously. Yeah.
When you'd have to intensify it. And when, we're talking about villains and whatnot, and, in extremis, when you're fighting, screaming, and that kind of stuff, and you do multiple takes, and it's like, okay, now the voice is gone. Oh, I know we have another hour left to record, but I don't have anything left now because we started with the screaming.
Yeah. Now we've learned, like, we save screaming till the end of sessions now.
But better idea. If you guys want to get your money's worth, because otherwise, they're going to probably ask you to re-record it when they hear it. So,
yeah, they're like, it's not usable. Okay, we have some fan questions for you.
Oh boy.
Some of them we have already answered. We talked about being sunshine and ultimate muscle. But then this person had a non-4Kids question. They wanted to talk about you working on Berserk since you were in the 97 anime, the 2012 version, the 2022 version. They want to know what it was like to go back and revisit that kind of, taking that time off.
Oh my God, Nosferatu Zod. My God, I just love that character. He was one of my favorites to do. I think I actually won an award for him at one point.
Ooh.
Which was
cool.
Nice. I appreciated it. I didn't know I was even up for it. It's like, well, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. But that's just icing on the cake. He was just such a delicious character to play. To be that all powerful and just and totally chaotic evil, that was a blast. And that's why it was such a treat to be asked to come back and revisit it and do it again. It's like, yes, of course I will. This is such a pleasure. And knowing that, again, one of the things I've run into over the years teaching at NYU is a lot of my students are fans. And then they find out who I am and they go, oh my God, I listened to you when I was growing up. This is amazing. And I had one guy who was just flipped out when he went, you're not Ratu Zod. Oh my God. So things like that. It's like, I'll definitely do this again because people loved it. When you hear that, it's a tonic. You go, oh, okay, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it, but I'm glad people are also getting a kick out of it too.
Did you get to work with the same director? I believe that was NYAV Post. So did you get to work with like Michelson or Nicholas on that and have some consistency with the direction?
Okay. Michael, come on. I love Michael.
They're the best.
We are just,
They're like the polar opposite of a lot of the stuff that happened at 4Kids. Like if you asked for Michael for like your character's backstory, you would get an hour monologue.
Right. We could go on for days, man. That's one of the things I love. The problem with me recording with Michael is we would just chat for an hour before we started recording. And it's like, oh,
I know. This is his episode of this show is about 14 hours long.
Well, really, I'm surprised.
Another fan question. We talked about Mosuke. This question is from Matthew Paul. They were the ones that wanted to know if your stage combat experience helped with Crocodile specifically. Again, because that was such a physical role as they described it.
Absolutely. Because, one of the things in being a choreographer, fight director with this is you study a lot of both real and film versions of violence. And you find what works best to tell the story. As we say, I tell my students now, we're not going for the reality of the violence. We're going for the truth of the violence, playing off Adler's quote. We're going for the truth of the violence. And often to get that, it's totally artificial. I'm going to be missing your face with my hand this, and you're going to be clapping for the sound of the hand hitting your face. And yet if we time it right, the audience will gasp when they see it. That's what we're going for. It's an art form. But it's the same thing with looking at the vocals with this. Some things that you might think that this will sound really, you hear what the reality of it is, and you go, that won't really work for this. It doesn't sound right in our minds of what it sounds like. I mean, you think of the famous Christopher Lee quote when he was working on Lord of the Rings, and they were filming the scene where he gets stabbed in the back, and Peter Jackson was saying, okay, so when you get stabbed, I really want you to be like, ah, and he goes, no, that's not the sound you make. And everyone kind of stops and goes, no, that's not the sound someone makes when they get stabbed in the back. They inhale. And Peter's like, okay, you do whatever. Like, Christopher Lee had been in the SAS in World War II.
I can imagine everyone just stopping what they're doing and listening.
It sounds like when you stab someone in the back to kill them. And I'm like, okay, well then. But again, you have to play what expectations are, and we're dealing totally orally with this.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Sometimes it's not accurate, but it gets it's more impactful. Like, so it's soliciting the response you want doesn't always come from truth, I guess, is the bummer of it.
But it does always come from truth. It doesn't necessarily come from reality.
Oh, reality.
But, for the artist that you're doing it, you're being truthful in this moment. I've worked with my students a lot with the stage combat in working with breath, because they tend to, if they're making any sound, we call it the grunt per move. Whether I'm throwing a punch or being punched, you have, and that's a generalized sound that people make for being hit or hitting someone. And as a fight master, I go and adjudicate fight tests around the country. And I was with a friend of mine who was also a fight master at a pretty egregious test where both combatants were going, and he leaned over to me and went, and somewhere in the distance, gorillas are mating. So there's that generalized sound. But if you work just constant breathing, I tell them to use breath to connect to the moves.
Right.
Breath is dialogue.
Right. And it's so much more honest that way.
And then if you do have to make an exertion or attack or something like that, if you're, it's more organic. It sounds like it's, as opposed to no breath, the grunt per move type of thing. So
right, like it always reminds me of, like, if you want to cry, like if you want to seem like you're crying, most people who are crying are trying not to cry. It's almost like sometimes you're trying not to make those exertions, and it's that stifling of your breath that causes the exertion. Or like there's much more math that goes into this.
It can be done purely technically, which is in some ways the old British school of acting, where you just technically, you so you can just technically do that with your voice and allow the sound to come in. But now I'm going back to, we go back with method to Stanislavski. Okay. At the same time Stanislavski was working, there was a guy, Meyerhold, and Stanislavski was saying, work from the inside out. You feel something and it's going to affect your emotions and how you're speaking. And Meyerhold was working from the outside in. You physically change what you're doing, and that will change your emotions. So he said sometimes if you run really fast, suddenly you'll be scared. because you're triggering different. And it's the same thing if you start with what we're talking about with the breath. If you're not feeling it today, to cry, if you technically just start your breath doing that, it can kickstart the emotions, and then the tears will come. So you can go either direction with it, inside out or outside in.
And the best actors use a combination of all of those things, which is so interesting, because so many of these schools want to teach you one thing. And that always just felt so counterintuitive to me. And I thought, I want to learn everything and then take a little bit from each.
Or what applies to this particular piece we're working on. This calls for Michael Chekhov right now, because I'm playing a larger than life character. So I want to radiate my energy in the Chekhovian fashion. You know, a lot of these techniques can be applied for different vehicles very effectively. And it's just so much fun.
It is so much fun. And I know, like, again, I bring it back to this because you are a teacher, and so many people ask me, how do I get into voiceovers? And they train with one person for 10 years. And I go, no, diversify. Like, you have to learn everyone's technique and then take what works for you. And I'm sure you see that with every aspect of your students, like whether it's stage combat or acting or voice or whatever it is.
Whatever it is. I mean, the biggest thing that I'm seeing with my students now is, you know, and I remember very distinctly one of my teachers having the same feeling. Is just, you know, if you can just get out of your own way, stop overthinking everything. I use the term in my classes, monkey mind. All right. If you're not, I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It's a Buddhist
nonstop.
term.
It's a nonstop. Activeness of your brain.
The monkey mind is that little voice in your head that's going, right, this interview is going to be over, then I'm going to have to finish that before tomorrow because I didn't do it earlier today. It's got you in the past or the future, but not here in the present moment. And in the West, we tend to think monkey mind is who we are. But if you've done any meditation,
especially New York, I mean, we're talking about New York City,
and you silence that voice, you don't cease to exist. If anything, you're more present than you were when you were chattering to yourself. You can feel the air currents in the room. You can hear the hum from the radiator. And yet we think this is who we are. It's not. That's just a muscle that we tend to just let run the show.
Yeah.
And yet we should really exercise that muscle. It can be very useful, but it tends to get scared. And that's what happens when we go in there. We want to pass everything through monkey mind. Is this the right choice? And at that point, it's too late. The moment's passed. That split second that you thought about it, it's over. That's why some of the best actors aren't necessarily the most intelligent actors. They're the ones that can respond in the moment. They react. They're natural. They're just there. And to me, that's the biggest thing. We have time for a story?
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I worked right after I'd graduated from NYU. There's a group, I don't know if you know Bread and Puppet Theater. Have you ever heard Bread and Puppet Theater? Have you seen Across the Universe, the movie?
Oh, yeah.
In that movie, you know, where they go to their one friend is out, you know, and there's a big giant tent and they're putting on a puppet show in there with the giant puppets. That's Bread and Puppet Theater.
That's them. Okay.
And they did activist theater in the 60s and 70s. They still do. They still exist. And Peter Schumann, God bless him, is still alive. The guy I worked with is still on 15-foot stilts. I mean, my God, this guy's amazing. Wow. And it was called Bread and Puppet. He came from Europe, and they'd put on a puppet show, and they'd give out black bread to everyone who was there watching the show. It was something they used to do in Germany when he was a kid. So Bread and Puppet Theater. But it was agitprop. It was political theater. And we were doing a show at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, if you know that space. The largest, I think it's the largest Gothic cathedral in the world.
Oh, wow.
And it's still under construction because it's going to take hundreds of years to finish it. But it's gigantic. And the thing was, those puppets in there, because the puppets are like 20 feet tall, in that space, it just looked like they lived there. because the thing is so huge.
So cool.
And the first thing that we did, the first rehearsal we had was with these giant 6-foot masks that you had to hold with both hands. And we had core puppeteers in front of us and behind us. And the music for it was this percussion orchestra of just found objects. So guys back there going, ding, 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 you know, and we're doing this dance with these huge masks, and they're fucking heavy. And so we're doing these, and it's pretty active. And we're getting to, I'm like, I gotta stop. It's like, well, goddamn it, I am not going to be the first one to stop.
Right. Not going to be
And so
me.
we finished that one. We're out of breath, and we did it. And I look at the puppeteers, and they're looking at each other going, not bad. Okay. Let's do it again. We do it a second time, faster. And now Monkey Mind is screaming at me. But another aspect besides Monkey Mind is Will Horse, which also has positive and negative quantities. Will Horse is, I'm going to do it no matter what.
Okay.
Sometimes that's positive. Sometimes, whoops, I should have stopped before I broke my leg.
Right.
You know? But Will Horse,
it's the
and I'm
stubbornness
not
inside you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we got through the second time, and now we're like, okay, wow. And they're now, the puppeteers are smiling. And then they went, let's do it one more time. And they doubled the pace. And now Monkey Mind is screaming. But I wasn't going to stop. And what happened was the voice died. And when the voice suddenly, it's what they say, getting a second wind. But suddenly, I wasn't moving the mask. The mask was moving me. And it was effortless.
Right.
And that's when the light bulb went off for me. This is what acting should be. Get out of your own fucking way, empty the vessel, let the character come in and do whatever the hell they want. Then you won't have to think about, is this the right move? Would he do this? He's doing it. I'm out of the way. He's just using this instrument at this point. So,
that's so interesting.
And that's where I think you have to get with it.
Well,
you know?
I think specifically with Fight, you're not talking about, oh, what if I miss a line? Maybe the show will suck. You're talking about if I'm not present while I'm doing combat, I might hurt somebody.
Oh, my God, yeah.
So yours is all of this on crack because there's real stakes that are not just, oh, the show might not be good.
Yeah.
So you're the best person to speak to this because of that. There's real stakes and points of knives and things. So
and yes, firearms.
Yeah.
When I choreographed, Martin McDonough, crazy boy, Lieutenant of Inishmore. So Lieutenant of Inishmore.
Oh, you did that one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Lieutenant of Inishmore. We fired 82 rounds of performance.
Oh my God.
5 gallons of blood of performance.
Jesus.
Martin
Real
McDonough.
blood. No, I'm just kidding. That's intense.
Marty is crazy.
Speaking of a celebrity, one of the other questions we got for you was non-4Kids, but they wanted to know about you working with the dreamy Pedro Pascal.
Well, he is.
They found a video. There's a video of you online working with him.
Oh,
so.
yeah. Pedro was a student at NYU, and we did a project together. It was a flying scenes from, what was it? Was it Titus Andronicus, I think? No. Which one was it now? Sorry, now I'm spacing.
That's okay. You don't need to remember every detail, but you could just say he was as dreamy then as he is now.
Oh, he's great to work with. he trained at the experimental theater wing. And when we're talking about, we're talking about improvising. I mean, that's what we were doing a lot.
Yeah.
And very physical. He was playing Thersites. I was Ajax. And so I was picking him up. He was flying. So I would grab him, pick him up, and throw him in the air. And he'd fly up and smack against the wall and then fall back down. And, that was the stuff we were doing together. It was just a hoot and a half.
So cool.
And I also worked with him on a play at the Women's Project, Sand.
Oh.
And that was just choreographing him in the violence of that play. It was set in Iraq during the Gulf War.
That's intense. Yeah, that sounds, yeah. We know, I know Wayne Grayson was the one that brought you over to 4Kids, but we know there was a professor or someone at NYU that was referring students. Was that you, or do you think that was another faculty member?
That was me.
So that was you.
Because after that happened, especially when we got into doing Winx Club.
Okay.
Because when we were doing Winx Club, I came in and I actually changed the name because they were calling him Saladin. And I'm like, the name should be pronounced Saladin.
Yeah.
That's the proper. And so they actually went back and went, oh, we're going to do it that way. And other people had to come in and re-record the name after that. Because it's the name of my character. And the character isn't Saladin. It's Saladin.
So you were referring students to these projects because they needed like younger voices.
Yeah, they were looking, we need someone to play these young women in Winx Club. And it's like, well, I'm working with some of the premier actresses. These are actresses up and coming. And this is a way for the students, they can start making some money and some decent money. And of course, as you know, a lot of them are still, recording now. They're very famous voice actors now.
That's so cool. Do you remember anyone specific?
Erica Schroeder.
It's okay. Erica. Oh, so Erica was one of yours. Okay, great. Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, I love. And then you got to be in scenes with her and stuff. How cool is that?
It's all in the family.
Oh, I love that.
But it also is a win-win because I knew they needed, we have a school and it's all these young women. And so we need, we want someone talented. It's like, I can get you a lot of very talented young women.
Yeah.
Because in order to get into NYU, to actually be picked to go to NYU, that's a lot just to get in.
Right.
And then to survive there, it's like, so these are top line folks.
Oh, I love that you were one of the connections with NYU. Yeah, there's this podcast, even, and not just the actors, the editors, engineers. It's such an NYU heavy company. 4Kids was. So I love that. I know you mentioned very briefly that you did a convention. Are you open to doing more of that kind of stuff in the future if people
I'd love to. I mean, I think that'd be great. Good. I just, because of me, I'm like, no one wants to see you.
Don't.
It's where I am. I'm like, no, they don't want it. They want these folks.
No, well, it's good to know because a lot of the time we get invited to these conventions because the fans, for the people listening at home, if you want to meet David, write to your local conventions and say, hey, here's someone who doesn't do a lot of shows who would be great to meet. Are you on social media? Is there somewhere that people can follow you? It's okay if you're not.
I really am not. I mean, okay. I have tried to keep separate. I have had some fans who, you can find my Facebook page.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to be, I sometimes will say hi, but usually I won't. And it's not because I don't love them. It's like I'm trying to keep this separate.
So let's respect his privacy, everybody.
Yeah, and it's well, thank you guys. I love you. But it's also like, well, if I open that door a crack, why did you answer him back, but you're not answering me back? Why didn't you? And I've had folks send me stuff in the mail. Can you sign this, please? And send it back. And I'm so sorry. I'm terrible at that.
And it's also, it feels a little bit when something arrives at, in the mail, it does feel a little bit like an invasion of privacy. Like that's how I've
that's
felt
not it.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm offended or anything. It's just I am neurodivergent. And that is, to me, it's like, and then I'll find it years later and go, oh God, that's right. That guy sent that to me. And here it is. And I never, because if I panned and showed you my desk here, it's like, I am not good with that stuff. If I'm at an event, happily sign anything and, all of that. But, trying to mail things and stuff like that. And I don't have pictures, headshots anymore or anything like that.
No, well, that's fine. Well, the good thing is, and I've been using this podcast to do this because I don't want you guys to have to be public if you don't want to be. So if there are, if you want to invite David to a convention near you, you can just email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com and I can forward those messages to him because not everybody wants to be a public Instagram star.
Oh my goodness, no.
And I want to make sure we put that out there because, again, social media is unfortunately the way a lot of these conventions do get in contact with us. So we're putting it out there. David is open to conventions.
Yeah,
do not stop
I've
him.
only been to a couple, but I loved them. I remember the first one I went to was down in Washington, was with Lisa Ortiz, and I was like, at first I'm going, okay, what are these folks going to be like? I hadn't met any anime fans. And I'm like, okay, is this going to be creepy and scary? Like I remember going to like a medieval group and they were a little weird, the Scadians. It's like, I am Lord so-and-so. And no. I was like, that's very nice. I'm going to back away.
And this is from
slowly
a
now.
stage combat, dude. This is, yeah.
Right. And I got there and they were the most wonderful folks I had ever met. I'm like, oh my God, these people are great. They're just the sweetest individuals. We had a lot of fun together. The panels I was on were great. A lot of them are extremely talented.
Yeah.
We were joking after, on some of the panels, we better watch out. This guy's going to take our job,
Yeah, they do your voices at you.
When they're doing some of like showing something, having them doing some dubbing, it's like, these guys are really good. Mm-hmm. We got to kill these guys off, otherwise we're going to. But I really did enjoy them. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And your teaching schedule is going well. You're still, is there anywhere are you performing anywhere that people can see you? Or?
No, I really, I am not doing any really performing right now.
Okay. But you're still doing voiceover when it comes up. So that's great.
I have a few coming up, but very few and far between. And I am now, I think I'm going to bite the bullet and eventually put in a home studio.
Home studio.
Because it's like,
I hope you do.
It's my segue into I am already compromised from doing stunt work for 40 years.
Right.
So I'm walking with a cane now, and it's like, that career is we're over the hump with that and coming down the other side of the hill with the stage combat work. And so that's why I've always said, well, when that happens, then we get behind the microphone. And so that's what I'm looking at now.
Oh, I'm excited to see what happens with that.
Thank you. I'm thrilled too. I so miss though it not being the case that we'd go back into a studio to record.
Yeah.
Because I just love you get a better product.
Yeah. In certain locations, in LA, they are for dubbing work. They do want me to come in. In Texas, there's a lot of anime going on and they do want them in studio. But for commercials and things like that, it's a home studio business now for the most part.
Yeah. And it's the same thing if you're doing books and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I built this was for books. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see what's next. We'll put that we're not going to put your social media because you don't have one.
Right.
So yes, hopefully you will get to meet David at a convention near you soon. David, thank you so much for your time. This was honestly just, this feels like inside the actor's studio and I love it.
Oh, bless you. Thank you guys so much. Just a pleasure talking old times and thinking about how great that was. And to realize there's these wonderful folks out there still enjoying it all. That's fantastic.
What? I wish I had seen him even more now that I got to have this time with David. What a sweetheart.
Yeah, very very comforting, warm presence. It's funny that you brought up Inside the Actor Studio because very James Lipton kind of vibes. I don't know, just very old school. I wouldn't. He called himself a boomer. I wouldn't want to call him a boomer to his face, but just very old school.
Yes, and exactly the kind of teacher I wish I had had. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't necessarily love my professors for theater and things like that, and I think that's somebody that would have gotten me to love stage combat or love whatever he taught. I think I'd be interested. I could listen to him talk all day.
Yeah. The discussion of monkey mind stuff is fascinating. I think it's similar to just baseball players trying to hit a home run, or an archer trying to hit a target. You're not trying to mentally, because you're never going to hit the target. It's the whole point is to not think about doing it. And that's how you do it.
And for just to come to be natural. But it applies to we're applying it to acting in this case, but it just really applies to everything, which I love.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. He could be a meditation teacher. I would listen to his, he should be doing meditation voices. I totally would listen to that. And we started talking about this, but I love that we caught that IMDb error live during the interview, because now you guys at home see how this works, that the actor himself didn't necessarily know if it was wrong. I definitely didn't know it was wrong. I didn't even know Crocodile and Zero were the same person.
It's tricky considering, like, we talk about, this being like 20 years later and this stuff not being kept track of. So yeah, of course, like, memory is tricky, and sometimes the people that actually that have done these roles, forget, even this was talked about on a previous episode. But if I could throw my hat in there, and I'm sorry to get so specific, I'm sorry, but we're talking about Lucky Roo, who was a One Piece character in there.
Yeah.
I'm from what I can remember, I'm pretty sure that was just a pitch down Michelson or Nicholas, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So,
and I'm going to jump on the Discord now and see if someone can get me a voice reference, because the trouble with IMDb.
I'll get you a voice reference. Give me like 5
that would
minutes.
be great if you could send it to me. I won't even bother because I'll tell you guys again, behind the scenes stuff, what happens with IMDb, they won't let me just take a role off. Like, if I can correct something and maybe give them like a link to where I heard it, or how I know, like a picture screenshot of credits, which doesn't help in the 4Kids situation, I'm more likely to get it fixed. Like, I was just able to update, they had Amy Pallant not listed as Millie in Shaman King. They had Amy Birnbaum, which is an understandable mistake, but I was just able to get that fixed. But it's like stuff like that. And I love that that's kind of a side mission of the podcast. So thank you, Steve, for knowing that. I love that you knew that.
It's One Piece, so it's just...
It's One Piece. Your monkey
it's
mind
One Piece,
knows
so
about
it's like
One
the one
Piece.
thing, and I'm like, yeah. It's like maybe other shows. I'm like, oh no, I don't remember that show at all. But that One Piece,
Do you
like,
think
I'm like,
anyone calls
no. It's
What
this.
if instead of monkey mind, it was a monkey D. Luffy mind?
I mean, that's what got Erica Schroeder in the 4Kids doors.
That's right.
Interesting. We didn't talk about it much. But I guess her being a former student of his, and then eventually they're playing opposites as lead role and lead villain.
Cool.
It's very poetic, It's stuff like that's cool. But
I dig that. I dig knowing that that he was one of the people, because I think there were a few professors that brought people in, because Ultraman was the first show Chris Cole mentioned going to a professor, and I don't. David was in Ultraman. We didn't get into it. I'm pretty sure he was, but there might have been a few teachers who were helping out. But it sounds like Winx Club was really where he stepped in. So cool. And yeah, what a sweetheart. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for what you're about to do, which is go on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you're going to hit that 5-star button.
yes,
Subscribe, rate, and review. We don't say it enough.
you should. And there are multiple places to do that. We're talking Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even YouTube. We put these on YouTube.
Just put the little like thing, subscribe to our channel. Oh, definitely subscribe. Come on, it's free.
Come on.
And you like us. If you are at this point in the podcast, if you are still listening to this episode in our nonsense,
that means you really like it.
You love us. Yeah.
Come on.
And because we know you have other things to do, we will.
Catch you next time.
4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4Kids Flashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. And for podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends, or 4. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to maji.media. Thanks for listening.